Welcome to the Alaskan Realtor live stream. My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm an associate real estate broker in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching in real estate. And today I am very happy to be joined by Mike Brown, who is the Borough Manager here in the MatSu Valley. And what that means is he's going to be the guy who knows all the stuff about he's going to know the actual development and what's going on here in the MatSu Valley. So if you have questions about development and changes that could be coming to the MatSu Valley like this is the guy that you need to be talking to. So we're very lucky to have him today. So we'll be talking about the upcoming developments. We've got about 30 minutes for the live stream today. So if you have questions, concerns, if you want to ask Mike the questions about the development here in the area, I'd recommend getting that into the comments section sooner rather than later so we can get those answered for you. Now, without further ado, Mike, again, thank you very much for joining us, sir. And let's go ahead and jump into our first question here. So, what are the three most consequential developments you see in the near future?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, first of all. I appreciate that. As far as developments go, three consequential, I'd probably start out, and I'm going to try to kind of stay in our wheelhouse as a borough and kind of what we do as a government. But I think, the thing we hear about all the time is transportation infrastructure. So, two of the key or two or three of the key developments, road wise, that would really help us out. Obviously, folks in this area know a lot about the Connect Goose Bay Road and what that's turned into with all of the growth over time. It's great to see DOT out there and that construction underway. I think that's going to be a very important infrastructure improvement for us. It's going to impact thousands of people. The next one would probably be the Seward Meridian Parkway. That's a pretty key north-south corridor for us. It's underdeveloped and not developed in some places where you look at that gap between Bogard and Selden. That creates a lot of pass-through traffic in neighboring subdivisions and stuff. So I think seeing a divided 4-lane that takes you, from where we are on the Palmer Wasilla Highway now up to Selden Road will be really important, especially for commuters and folks that are, getting access to and from the Parks Highway to some of the development that's to the north of that. And so that's going to, really help us out a lot along that Bogard-Selden corridor. Those would be two of the bigger ones. I think the third one I would mention that's kind of maybe a little bit different, so I don't talk specifically or only about transportation infrastructure, is really talking about water and wastewater treatment. The borough is not in that business with the exception of up in Talkeetna. We have a water and wastewater treatment facility up there to support Talkeetna. But the cities of Wasilla and Palmer. So that's something we're really interested in partnering with them. Recently, the Borough Assembly approved funding to support expansion of both city systems and a project to create an interconnect that would improve resiliency. So I think that's an interesting start to seeing the borough partner with the cities in something that the borough doesn't actively do, but would arguably help to provide the conditions for higher density development.
Gotcha. I'm really glad that you mentioned kind of the higher density development. Is that something that Wasilla, Palmer, like I understand kind of the philosophy of development is kind of different between both cities.
Mm-hmm.
Are they both trying to move more towards being on like the regular city water and sewer, or is one city lean in that direction more so than the other?
Yeah, I think the opportunity is, the cities have infrastructure. They have those treatment facilities already in existence. It would be very difficult and very costly if the borough were to try to wade into that and establish its own treatment facility or develop that infrastructure. So what we see is an opportunity to partner with the cities to expand theirs beyond the current city limits, whether that's through a water district or something like that. It wouldn't necessarily have to be through annexation or anything like that necessarily, but it would, especially in certain key areas between the two cities along kind of that Palmer-Wasilla corridor. There are opportunities to have higher density development in there that would be better enabled if it had access to water and sewer. And so, we look at that and see, well, there's a way we can work together on this because in the end, if we can't address that problem to some degree, I think it's going to be challenging from an affordable housing perspective to be able to create, housing opportunities that aren't, necessarily a $300,000 single family, residential home for younger families and folks in that type of situation. So that's, and when you look at some of the commercial development as well, obviously they have some pretty robust needs, and that can be very expensive if you're trying to build out your own system. So we do see some opportunities there where, the cities are they have proximity, but we're going to need to work together to figure out how do we expand beyond their current limits.
Right. No, I mean, I see that 100%. I mean, I'm thinking about, I think it's a 10-plex that's probably 2-3 miles away from where I'm at right now in northern Wasilla. Like, great property. It's got a lot going for it, except really struggles getting enough water to it, just with the wells and the sewage system that it has. So they've had to go and do like some more creative solutions to try to get all the people in there serviced, but be way easier if it was just connected.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's obviously for, your average business, especially if it's a small business, this idea of, creating your own connection would be almost impossible. So, I mean, the government's going to have to look at how do we get it in the neighborhood, even if it's just getting it to a point where, you can connect to a service line. So, and it benefits even the borough. So like, for example, we put in water line years ago down Bogard Road when we were building the extension between Palmer High School and Colony High School. Yet Colony High and middle schools are still on wells and septic. And it's like, well, there's some
those are the schools.
Those are the two largest. So at least from an enrollment perspective. So, we're looking at that and going, yeah, if we can partner with City of Palmer, which we did on this one, a booster station for Bogard Road, we could extend water to those schools. And the same premise exists in Wasilla, to different developments. So I think that's what we're looking at is how do we work together? I think it also makes you more competitive for federal grant opportunities. And so I think that's really, like, that has consequences when you can see that your local governments, whether it be at the city level or at the borough level, are working together and having some common sense, some common purpose, so that we can go out there and work together, because that puts us in a much better position with the state government in terms of funding that we might be seeking as well as federal.
That's a really good point that I don't think a whole lot of people really fully appreciate as much as they should, just the amount of funding that you can get from, the higher government sources, because there's only so much you can generate through sales tax and property taxes in the area. So you get to a certain point where kind of fulfilling the obligations to get those funding is going to be a big deal. So you mentioned kind of the water a little bit. Are there any other, I guess, benchmarks we could be doing that would help us to qualify for kind of that other funding?
Yeah. So like when I mentioned the interconnect project, that's one where we're working together. It's a multi-million-dollar project actually to construct it. But what we partnered on is let's get the design advanced. That helps. One, it helps you narrow down your cost estimate so you know what you're actually going to need to build. But it also helps you when you're going forward with these grant applications and whatnot, seeking funding. It helps you score higher because they see that there's already some work already been advanced by the local, whether it's the borough or whether it's the cities. And that tends to help you score higher when you're competing in these competitive grant programs, especially at the federal level.
Okay, that's another good point too. Yeah, I guess they're not just waiting around for us to get our ducks in a row.
They are absolutely not. And I hear that a lot. Folks will say because of the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act or the bipartisan infrastructure legislation that occurred or law that occurred a couple of years ago, about all this federal funding for infrastructure. And certainly there is funding out there. Some of that made its way through federal agencies that passed that through to states and to some degree to local governments. But a lot of it came through competitive grant programs, which means you got to compete.
Right.
So you have to figure out what are the criteria and then how do you align yourself to best compete so that you can score higher and increase your opportunity or probability of getting a grant award.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So folks, we've got about another 10 minutes or so before we'll open it up for questions. So any thoughts, questions, concerns, anything like that you have, go ahead and drop it in the comments section. We're going to try to get to as many of them as we possibly can here. So I've got another question here. So how are these kind of the changes we mentioned before with the transportation, how are those kind of projected to impact the area?
Yeah, so the main ones I mentioned are kind of these key arterials or corridors. So when you kind of look at it from an east, west, north, south perspective, like Seward Meridian, the Parks and Glen Highway, when you look at the Bogart-Selden corridor, KGB, I mean, these are key transportation corridors. And so we want them to work efficiently. We want them to be effective in moving people, goods, services. And I think when we look at the congestion that it creates or the number of accidents and the issues with safety. I mean, I kind of look at KGB and, we saw the growth in the Kinnick and Fairview area for years. And then you kind of saw what started to happen to KGB. It was really undersized for the capacity to move folks. And then you kind of saw that kind of taper off a little bit because of the concerns of it being a safety corridor. And so now we see that investment to come in there to make it a safe highway, something that you can move through in an efficient manner that makes sense. It's not frustrating. I think, that just lends itself to creating conditions where people want to be in an area, right? So if you're just commuting for working purposes, but also where you can go to the grocery store or access recreational opportunities, like you just want it to be easy. Folks don't want to be frustrated and dealing with traffic. If you wanted that, you'd probably live in a major city somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, right now it's like, okay, so you've got kind of the small town kind of size, but you kind of have some of that big city like traffic
Absolutely.
in some places
Right.
at certain times of the day. Now, I'll also say it also kind of comes down to what you're used to, because I mean, I'll complain about traffic and all that, but somebody comes in from Miami and they put me in my place pretty quick.
That's true.
So it's all about what you're used to. Okay, so are there any big changes we're seeing or we're anticipating to see as far as zoning?
Yeah, I guess the way I would talk about zoning is really to talk about, what we focus on is how do we contribute to creating conditions for the market to develop, right? Where people can go in. So like we talked about transportation infrastructure, we could talk about good schools and having good school infrastructure. And we saw that like an example of that a few years ago, or I guess maybe it's several years ago now, but when we made a pretty significant investment in the Kinnick community with Joe Reddington Jr. Sr. and then Denina Elementary Schools, where you had folks that really were on the periphery of the boundary and were required really to kind of come in, at least for secondary school purposes, to like the Wasilla area.
Right.
So creating those conditions where that can occur. As far as zoning goes, we are about to, or actually are already starting this comprehensive plan update. So I think that's going to be an opportunity for the community and for us to have discussions with the community, conversations about what do folks want. What I can say with certainty is we have more land use conflicts now than we did 10 years ago. Like that part's obvious. The question is, well, what do you do about that? And whether it's zoning or whether it's something else, I don't know. I think that conversation will occur as we go through this comprehensive plan discussion and talk about, what are the expectations of our residents and what do they expect their government to do. And I think there are some opportunities to do some things that would help make it more predictable that don't necessarily include like borough-wide zoning. Like I absolutely don't see that kind of thing from happening, but I can see some opportunities where we could potentially help set better conditions where folks can come in and have that predictability and know that if they're going to make an investment, that it's going to be protected.
Right. I mean, for those of you like listening, really kind of the concern about kind of protecting your investment is what happens if you build like a nice little single family home and then a mechanic shop opens up right next to it, like a year later. Like that's more of kind of the thought. And for a while, it's kind of been kind of a laissez-faire kind of a zoning, not always in all instances, but more or less it's been pretty broad in what you can do and can't do.
No, that's fair. And I think what you see is trying to strike a balance where the government's not trying to drive the market, but then you still have some protections in place so that, individuals that move into an area, invest in a single family home, know that, that's probably the largest investment of their life, that it's going to be protected and that the value is not going to dissipate because somebody moved in next door and built a junkyard or something like. So I think it's fair. The question is, how do you strike that balance and where does that lie? And like I said, it is clear we're having more of those land use conflicts as we grow, right? Because you just have more folks closer together, higher density. So I do think those conversations will continue to occur. And the comp plan is going to give us an opportunity to kind of revisit that as we haven't kind of on a larger scale in a number of years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, nothing helps you get a pulse of the community better than once you start talking about taking a look at the zoning. Because I mean, then like the overall priorities of the community really comes to the forefront. Because I mean, you've got the people who just want to do whatever,
right?
And just whatever, whenever, however. And then you've got other people that are looking more for kind of that HOA existence in other places too. So there's kind of a middle ground there. We're obviously not taking a stance one way or the other. We're just saying that conversation is probably going to be coming. Absolutely. Well, not probably, it's coming.
Yeah, and arguably it's already happening in smaller pockets right now where you have, I mean, maybe more at the individual level. And that's what we want to make sure we can do is not, I mean, with this growth is make sure we do our best to manage that land use in a way that kind of helps to prevent some of these conflicts. Because obviously, neighbors don't want to be opposed to one another. And so there are some things we can do, but then there's also finding that balance where you're still operating where the market is making some determinations about where certain types of development may or may not occur.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be fun. So stay tuned. Outstanding. So we've got a couple more questions here. So are there unique challenges to development in the MatSu Valley compared to what we find in other parts of the state?
Absolutely. I think the thing that makes us the most unique is the fact that we're growing. You're not seeing that in other parts of the state. So we make this argument often because it's true, is that because we're growing, we have unique challenges that we are facing as a community that Anchorage and others on the road system, I mean, communities that are maybe similar to us, Kenai, Fairbanks, et cetera, but that they aren't facing it in the same way because this kind of growth, especially the rapid nature of the growth over a number of years, like we just talked about transportation, those challenges exist because we're growing. If we weren't growing, you wouldn't be seeing these things happen, or certainly see them happening as quickly as they are. So that first and foremost, I think, makes us unique in Alaska. And that's always an interesting conversation when you get to Juneau, like when you're talking to legislators and stuff, because they have different perspectives. And if you're not living it, I don't know that you completely understand, how that affects us, and kind of the state's role in helping us, kind of walk through that.
Yeah, that's I just don't think a lot of people in other parts of the state really appreciate the development going on here.
No.
Like if nothing else kind of gives you a perspective, in the MatSu Valley, about 75% of all of the new construction in the entire state happens in the MatSu Valley. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's upmarket, high inventory, low inventory. Like it's still consistently 75, 74%. All the new construction is going on here. And then, I mean, do you have any just stats off the top of your head for how much we have grown?
I would not off the top of my head. I mean, obviously we just went through a new census here a couple of years ago, and we saw some reapportionment, redistricting and all that kind of thing. It is causing us to cross a threshold for federal transportation planning with this new, what we call the metropolitan planning organization or area, which is a boundary, where the U.S. Census Bureau designated a certain area within the core area, and it's predominantly the cities of Palmer, Wasilla, and then what's around there, as urbanized. So that qualifies us for funding in new ways, and also brings with it some other determinations around transit, around stormwater management. So yeah, we're seeing that not just locally in terms of what we deal with, but also some federal recognition for the density that's beginning to occur.
Right.
And has occurred in some cases.
Right. And I mean, I'm just curious real quick. This is a little off script, but do you have an idea for kind of what's spurring on this this development? Because I mean, Wasilla, Palmer, this was way out in the sticks like 15, 20 years ago. And now we're suddenly seeing a lot of proliferation of development. So I know there's a lot of factors, but yeah.
I think that's to each their own. I'll give you my opinion. I think I mean, obviously, just when you just look at the valley, just the beauty of it is amazing. And to be out here and have the opportunity to live in that, but then, ideally, as we talk about like economic development and jobs and things like that, to work out here, and then obviously to play is just it's amazing. I mean, you just can't do that in most other settings or municipalities. And when I look at where we're situated, I mean, we have access to a larger metropolitan area, right? We're on the road system. There's land out here. There's real estate. Like you can actually still have space, right? You're still near services, but at the same time, you can kind of still stretch your arms out a little bit and have a little bit of space. So I think all of those things contribute to, I think, what make people want to come out here. I think also, I mean, when you look at it from a government perspective, I mean, we're kind of a limited form of government. I would argue, and this probably get me in trouble when I say this, I think our taxes are fairly reasonable when you look at it, and I mean, you still get access to some of those services. So whether you're accessing commerce or whether you want access to things that would be more common in an urban setting, I think you still get that. But what I love about it out here is you choose if you want to go live in Sutton and have more space, or you want to be in the Northern Valley and be a little bit farther away, or whether you want to be around some of the magnificent lakes and stuff we have out here. There's plenty of opportunity. Or if you want to be in a city, I mean, all of it's available to you. So I think that's what I love about the diverse nature of the borough and the valley in general is you choose. All of those options are on the table. And then, when you look at communities all the way from Talkeetna, Willow, Big Lake, Meadow Lakes, Wasilla, Palmer, Houston, and then, like I said, Sutton, Glacier View, like there's the Connect Fairview area, Point McKenzie, there's just some amazing communities out there. And then you go pick. And then you see that, like you talked about the small town piece, like Palmer versus Wasilla, they're not the same. Right? They have different characteristics. They bring different things to the table, and so folks select based on what fits their them best.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we've got a couple questions here. So let's go ahead and fire these off real quick. So coming in from Nani Palmer. So is there an expansion on the Parks Highway on the docket for going through Wasilla? So we kind of touched a bit on this before, but
yeah, we did a little bit. We didn't talk specifically about the Parks Highway Alternative Corridor. That's one of the projects DOT is currently studying, which essentially is a Wasilla bypass. I think there are going to be a number of challenges with finding a route that works for folks because a lot of that area is already developed. So I think everyone understands the need for the Parks Highway and alleviating some of the congestion that's occurring there. I think DOT's approach is to kind of look at a bypass as an option. But ultimately, I think at some point we're going to have to look at, what is that commerce or what is that traffic that's coming out of Anchorage, maybe accessing interior Alaska, and is there a better way to potentially avoid bringing that through the core area of the valley? I think that would be very helpful The bypass won't necessarily do that, but it would allow you to kind of divide some of that traffic and spread it around so that the core of the city or what's occurring today is improved.
Yeah, because I mean, what we have right now is it's kind of that small town, but then you still kind of get that larger town congestion. It's not
Absolutely.
really all the people who live here. It's just everyone has to go through
That's right.
Wasilla in order to get to Talkeetna, Willow, Fairbanks, wherever it is you're going. So everyone's got to go through.
Absolutely.
All right, let's see here. Got another question coming in here from Eric. The housing development for us is Rambling Heights. How do you feel about that location? Let's see if I can pull this up real quick.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that at face value. So
yeah, I mean, let me see if I can pull this up real quick, Eric, just to kind of get a better feel for it. And I'm going to give you kind of a just let you know first off, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to steer you into or away from any areas because that is a violation of fair housing. So let me see if I can take a look here, though. Trying to get this to upload on a map real quick. Oh, you know what? I think I know where this is at. Just taking a second to load here. Okay, so that's out near like the Big Lake area. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I really don't see any issue out there. Yeah, I really don't see any issue out there. Really the thing to keep in mind is out there you're probably might just have maybe some more wetlands, maybe just with all the lakes and everything around there. I'm assuming whichever real estate agent you're working with, they're going to give you the information you need to kind of know exactly what it is. And the builder is going to be very upfront about any issues that there is going on there as well. With there being kind of wetlands in the area, I would recommend going to Walmart and investing in a pretty good anti-mosquito repellent. You can get some pretty good machines out there, so just make sure you come prepared for the environment. All right. But other than that, I think that's the questions we have from the comments section real quick. So folks, I'm going to ask a couple more questions here and we're going to call it good. If you have any questions, concerns, anything like that, like I said, this is the guy that's going to know about development here in the MatSu Valley. So if you got something, now's your opportunity. So let's go and ask this one real quick. How has development in the MatSu Valley kind of differed from development in other parts of the state?
Well, I think one of the things, when you look at the MatSu, like we talked a little bit about the diversity of it. I mean, geographically speaking, we have the potential to spread out.
It's enormous.
It's enormous.
Yeah.
And I think what you've seen in the past is people spread out. And now you start to see density occur, and that's kind of a different set of conditions. Like that's a different approach. And so I think that's one of the things for sure. I mean, when you consider Anchorage, for example, I don't think spread out has ever been a word down there because they're geographically confined to that space. And then, I mean, even when you get into other areas of the state, you're going to have mountainous areas. You're going to have terrain that's going to potentially prohibit development. The benefit of being in a valley, with the confluence of these rivers is like we have a lot of space, but we also get access to the mountains and all the other wonderful things that brings. So I think, that's probably one of the things that sets us apart. I mean, Kenai obviously has a lot of space down there, and they have a lot of just natural beauty and some of those same things. But in the end, I think that's one of the things that makes the MatSu a little bit different from other municipalities. And of course, having access to Anchorage and the services, the airport, different things that are down there, it's great. I mean, proximity is helpful because you can be close to it, but you don't necessarily have to live in it. You can have more space, more acreage, whatever it is that you desire.
Right. So we've got a couple more questions here, Mike, and we will let you get on your ways. Fair enough? Okay.
Absolutely.
So got a question coming in here from Mark. Why are there fences around yards up there in the MatSu?
Are there fences around yards? I guess that would be, I mean, I have a fence around a portion of my yard. Some of that, I have a dog, so the fence somewhat helps me out with maintaining control of my dog and giving her space to roam a little bit. I guess that would vary a little bit. My fence, for example, doesn't obscure my view of the mountains and whatnot, but it does provide a point, like for me, where I can, for an animal, that would be one example. And I think, that depends for folks, like, if they've got something that they just don't want to have other folks be able to see, or if it provides them physical security, whatever that may be.
Right. I mean, I'd say it also really comes down to the area that you're going to. Like if you go to more of that urbanization, a little bit more closer to like downtown Wasilla, downtown Palmer, you're probably going to see more fences. But the further out you go, you might see one in an entire neighborhood, and it looks kind of goofy, that one person with a yard too. So it kind of depends where you're going to.
That's right. Absolutely.
All right. Another question here. What is the best place in the MatSu Valley to retire to? Not a loaded question at all.
Oh, I would be a fool to pick a spot. I can tell you that that's what I love about the MatSu is the diversity, so it's kind of funny when I watch what folks are doing, like when I talk to people that are, say, living in Anchorage and they're looking to retire, and they're like, well, we don't necessarily need to be in Anchorage anymore. We want that proximity. I've seen a lot of growth, or talked to a lot of folks that have been buying places in Willow. And I'm like, well, that makes sense to me. It's on the road system. You're still kind of close to Wasilla, but you're out far enough. There's beautiful lakes out there. Obviously, big lakes blown up in the past number of years. I mean, just what a remarkable lake out there. You've seen some growth in Houston as well. Meadow Lakes, obviously for many of the same types of reasons, but now you're seeing more and more folks, so you kind of see that push where folks that want a little bit more space maybe go a little bit farther out from the core area. But for those that are in the core area that might want more services, they might want to retire in Wasilla or in Palmer. So that they're close to those services, whether that be medical facilities or just other services in general. So I think it really just depends on what you're looking for. I've heard of folks that, want to be kind of in the thick of that, maybe, but at the same time, folks that want to kind of have a little bit more space, have kind of more of that authentic cabin, Alaskan frontier kind of feel.
Yeah, and that's always kind of the balance I see them having to make, is everyone understands I want to be off grid, not talk to anyone, but also it's 2 hours to get to Walmart.
They're
man.
trade-offs. It's trade-offs. So you have to figure out what's most important to you. I mean, I where we look at, like, I want some of that natural beauty, but you can get that anywhere in the valley. Literally. So it's amazing what opportunities and options are out there.
Yeah, it's not like there's one mountain, like got it all over the place.
It's all good.
Okay, so I've got one more question here.
Sure.
So coming in from Dustin, what about purchasing property on tribal land, I guess over in Chickaloon? Are you bound to their restrictions and codes? I don't know. Do you deal a whole lot with this? Like I've dabbled a little bit with like a larger piece further up north, but I don't know if you have any.
I don't have any specific experience. I mean, with most developments, obviously, however, it's like if it's subdivided and there's covenants and restrictions, that's going to be disclosed with the property. Borough code's borough code. It's pretty straightforward, but more times than not, what becomes more restrictive is the covenants and restrictions that are placed on the property based on how it was subdivided. But I don't know specifically with tribal land in Chickaloon. So unfortunately, I don't think I can give you a very good answer to that question.
Yeah, I can tell you, at least for the piece of land we were looking at, it's not really a quick, easy, simple kind of process, because anytime you go to buy tribal land, at least the one we were looking at, You have to go meet with the tribal leaders. You have to essentially do all this stuff to make sure you're going to be a good fit in that community, and make sure that you're not going to go and put up a bunch of stuff like open like a junkyard in this land. So I do know that it's going to be different with each property. The big thing is just to expect it to be a process, and probably don't expect it to happen overnight. That's really the big thing. All right. Well, Mike, I'm going to respect your time here, sir. So I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with us. And everyone else, thank you very much for joining us. If you have any other questions, then do feel free to reach out, and be happy to see if I can get some more answers for you. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us, and you all have a great evening.